Emily's trembling voice barely rose above a whisper as tears streamed down her face. For the first time in years, the woman who had always believed she was doing the right thing finally saw the damage hidden behind her husband's quiet smiles. Every birthday he had skipped for himself, every dream he had postponed, every extra shift he had worked without complaint suddenly came crashing back into her memory. She realized that while she had been giving pieces of their life away to everyone else, she had unknowingly taken away the one thing her husband had quietly protected all along, the feeling that he still mattered in his own home. David looked exhausted, not with anger but with years of silent disappointment. His eyes held no hatred, only sadness so deep that it broke Emily's heart more than any shouting ever could. He gently admitted that he had never wanted expensive gifts or grand gestures. All he had ever hoped for was to know that his sacrifices were seen, that his feelings were important too. Every time she chose someone else's needs over the promises they had made together, another small piece of his heart disappeared. Eventually, there was nothing left for resentment to destroy because love had simply become buried beneath loneliness. Emily fell to her knees, overwhelmed by guilt she could no longer escape. She confessed that she had mistaken his silence for strength and his patience for endless understanding. She had believed he would always wait, always forgive, always carry the weight alone. She never realized that even the strongest hearts can grow tired when they are the only ones holding a marriage together. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence carried years of unspoken pain, broken expectations, and forgotten dreams. Then Emily reached into an old wooden drawer and carefully removed a worn notebook she had found while cleaning the attic a few days earlier. Inside were David's handwritten dreams from before they were married, a small lakeside cabin, weekend fishing trips with future children, learning to play the piano, and traveling across the country with the woman he loved. Almost every page had one heartbreaking note written in the corner. Maybe someday, after everyone else is okay. Emily could no longer control her tears. She finally understood that her husband had not lost his love for her. He had lost the part of himself that believed he deserved to be loved too. The next morning, without telling David, Emily began making quiet changes. She apologized to family members she had always placed first and gently explained that her marriage needed healing. She canceled commitments that had consumed their lives and used her savings to restore the old cabin David had once dreamed of owning. Every nail hammered into those wooden walls became another promise to rebuild the life they had almost lost. Weeks later, she brought David there just before sunset. The cabin wasn't perfect. The paint was unfinished, the porch still needed repairs, and the furniture was old. But hanging above the fireplace was the notebook's first page, framed with a simple message beneath it. "Your dreams matter too. They always did. I'm sorry it took me this long to see them." David stood frozen, his eyes filled with tears he had hidden for years. He didn't see a cabin. He saw proof that someone had finally chosen him. For the first time in what felt like forever, he embraced Emily without hesitation. It wasn't a hug that erased the past. It was a promise that healing was finally possible because both of them were willing to carry the weight together. Sometimes love doesn't disappear because someone stops caring. Sometimes it fades because one heart keeps giving until there's nothing left to give. But when honesty replaces silence, and appreciation replaces assumption, even the deepest wounds can begin to heal. Before we reach the end of this story, tell us in the comments. What do you think is the most important thing in keeping a marriage alive? Love, trust, communication, or appreciation? As the sun disappeared behind the lake, David smiled. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because for the first time in years, he no longer felt invisible. And Emily finally understood that the greatest gift you can give the person you love is not your leftovers after everyone else. It is making them feel that, no matter what the world demands, they will always have a place where they come first. A year passed, but healing was never as simple as one apology or one heartfelt embrace. Trust, once broken by years of quiet neglect, returned in small moments rather than dramatic gestures. Emily stopped promising that everything would change overnight. Instead, she showed David every single day that he finally mattered. She learned his favorite meals again, asked about his long days at work, and listened without interrupting. More importantly, she stopped putting everyone else's emergencies ahead of the family they had built together. David wanted to forgive, yet fear lingered inside him. Every time Emily's phone rang late at night with another request from relatives, his heart tightened. He wondered if history would repeat itself. But this time, she looked at the phone, silenced it, smiled gently, and stayed beside him. That tiny decision spoke louder than 1,000 apologies ever could. Months later, David suffered a mild heart attack while working overtime. The doctors said he had ignored stress for too many years. Lying in the hospital bed, weak and exhausted, he watched Emily refuse to leave his side. She slept in an uncomfortable chair, held his hand through every painful night, and whispered that she was not caring for him out of guilt anymore. She was doing it because she had finally remembered the man she had fallen in love with. When David was discharged, Emily took him somewhere he had never expected. It was the little lakeside cabin they had begun restoring together. But now it was finished. Flowers surrounded the porch. Wind chimes danced softly in the breeze. Inside, every dream from David's old notebook had become reality. There was a fishing rod by the door, a second-hand piano near the window, shelves filled with books he had always wanted to read, and hundreds of photographs of the life they had slowly rebuilt together. On the table rested one final envelope. David opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter Emily had written. She admitted that for years she had believed love meant sacrificing everything for everyone. She had been praised for her generosity, yet she had failed the one person who had silently sacrificed the most. She thanked David for never becoming cruel despite carrying unbearable loneliness. She admitted that she could never erase the pain she had caused, but she promised she would spend the rest of her life making sure he never questioned his worth again. By the time he finished reading, tears blurred every word. He looked up to find Emily standing quietly a few feet away, unable to speak because she was crying just as hard. David slowly walked toward her. He didn't say she was perfect. He didn't say the past no longer mattered. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her and whispered that forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is choosing love again after both hearts have learned the value of each other. At that moment, both of them understood something that would stay with them forever. The greatest betrayal in a marriage isn't always unfaithfulness. Sometimes it is making the person who loves you the most feel like they always come last. And the greatest act of love isn't buying expensive gifts or speaking beautiful words. It is choosing the same person every single day, even when life gives you countless reasons to look somewhere else. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share what lesson stayed with you the most, because your words may encourage someone who is quietly fighting for their own marriage. David and Emily grew old together. Their hair turned gray, their hands became wrinkled, and their steps became slower. Yet every evening they sat on the porch of that little cabin, watching the sunset in peaceful silence. Years earlier, Emily had asked, "Why don't you want me anymore?" Now she finally knew the answer had never been about love disappearing. It had been about a heart that had waited too long to be chosen. And from that day until their final breath, she made sure he never had to ask whether he mattered again.